Hey, let's do a chess lesson. Today, we're going to be talking about forcing moves, how they can help you become a better chess player, and hopefully get your first or more brilliant moves. To start, we're going to be talking about what a forcing move actually is. Then, we'll go over the three types of forcing moves. We'll do a puzzle to practice this concept. I'll give you some advice on how to get a brilliant move on chess.com, in case that's what you're interested in. And then we'll end the video by finding a brilliant move of our own. But before we get started, I want you to take a look at the position on the screen. So this is actually from one of my games, and I wanted to brag. Just kidding. Let's actually give a little context. Okay. We got to this position by taking on g7 with our bishop. This is an inaccuracy. The position's still winning. Our opponent responds the best way. Then we play the brilliant rook takes g7 check. This move is brilliant because our opponent can't accept the sacrifice. They should run their king away, be down 2 pawns, and try to survive. But they do accept the sacrifice. So, why is this winning? Why is this a good position? Well, I think it'd be really fun if you answer that in the comments. Take some time, try to figure it out. And if you can't right now, that's wonderful. Watch the rest of this video, and then hopefully using the concepts we talk about, you'll be able to figure out the winning move. Let's get started. So, what is a forcing move? Well, a forcing move is just a move that limits the number of possible responses for your opponent. This is done with checks, captures, and threats. All these moves do is they tend to force your opponent to respond to them. So, for example, if you check your opponent's king, they gotta get their king to safety. If you threaten a rook, they're probably gonna move that rook. These are what forcing moves are. They are very important to your game. They simplify chess, and that is why they're so important. Chess is very complicated. If you're trying to calculate, if you're trying to think ahead in chess, it can be very difficult to think of lines and to think of all the possible responses, because if you're debating between 3 moves and to each of those moves your opponent has 5 responses, you're looking at 15 moves already, and each of those moves your opponent makes, you have 5 moves you could respond with, and now you can't calculate. But when you look at forcing moves, you're going to limit the number of responses. So if you make a move, your opponent has 1 response, then you can think about your next move after that, and you can think ahead. And this is very valuable in chess. You're going to need to be able to do this to find tactics, to win games, to put pressure on your opponent. So now let's take a little bit of a closer look at checks, captures, and threats. Starting with threats. In this case, we're looking at the most forcing type of threat, a checkmate threat. Sometimes threats can be ignored, and in this case, they cannot, because the threat of checkmate, if ignored, results in you winning the game. So they'll play a move like pawn to g6, or queen to f6, or queen to e7 to stop checkmate. Captures can be very forcing as well. In this position, if you capture your opponent's queen on e7, your opponent's not going to want to give you all that material for free, so they have to capture back. And in this position, they only have one piece that can do that, and that is by moving the knight on c6. Checks tend to be the most forcing type of move because the game of chess doesn't allow you to ignore a check. You have to get your king to safety. That can be done by capturing the piece checking your king. It can be done by moving your king to safety or by blocking. And in this position, all your opponent can do is block the check. They can block with the bishop or queen, but you'll take their knight on d4, winning material. So they might play the best move, which is moving that knight on d4 backwards to e6, blocking the check and getting their knight to safety. Now that we've seen what a forcing move looks like, let's practice with a puzzle. Okay, let's set the stage for this puzzle. You're the black pieces. You're losing. You're down 14 points of material. All hope is lost. You have a weak king and you have almost no chances, but you find the courage to play on. You play a forcing move, queen to h1 check, and your opponent makes a big mistake. They drop their rook back to f1, forgetting you attacked the square twice. So you jump in with your rook, giving a check to the enemy king. You're still down 9 points material. You're still lost. But your opponent makes their final mistake. They run to the middle of the board, and your spidey senses are tingling. You know you can win this position. Now all you have to do is prove it. This is the puzzle. Pause the video, give this a shot. Now that you've done that, let's get started. Let's go through this together. So, we're going to start by looking at threats, then we'll go to captures, then we'll go to checks. This is the wrong order. You should always start with checks first because checks are the most forcing. A check, for example, queen f3, leaves your opponent with one move. A threat, like queen to h3, trying to set up some sort of mating net, leaves your opponent with, like, they can move their king to safety, they can give us checks, like, they have a lot more responses, so it's going to take a lot longer to calculate. You should start with your most forcing move. But we'll go backwards for the sake of going through everything. Excuse me. We don't really have threats. This is a made-up threat. This isn't a threat, really. Trying to pretend we're creating a mating net here, but it just doesn't work. As we've seen, our opponent can run away. They can give us a check. Okay, that leads us to captures. We have 2 captures in this position. We can capture on e4 and hang our queen. That's not very good. Let's not do that. Okay, maybe we can win a knight here. Is this good? Well, let's calculate it. If we take the knight on b1, what will our opponent do? Well, they'll likely just capture back. That's likely the best move. If they capture back, what will we do? If you're looking at checks, this is a mistake. This is a mistake because back in this position, checks are stronger, right? Because we have this rook on the board as well. We have 2 attacking pieces. Once we make this exchange, now we only have 1 attacking piece. It's not going to be better to give checks with only 1 attacking piece, right? So, for that reason, we're committing when we're looking at this capture to say, hey, maybe going this route, capturing, winning this knight is better. And is it? Well, no. Our opponent can give us checks again or simply make one move and their king just looks so safe. Even they could leave their king here too. The queen's not able to checkmate the king on her own, so that's not going to work out. Okay, so now we've eliminated captures. And one thing I want us to realize is there's 2 benefits of this puzzle. One is we're going to practice like going through a lot of moves, and you can see how you would do that in your head. The other thing is like thinking about how we would think about calculating and how we can save time. So like this example of not looking at checks here is a fundamental way you'll get faster at calculating, saving time by eliminating moves before you go through them. Okay, so what are the checks in this position? We should be looking for our best check. Well, we have a check with the queen on h5, h2, g2, and f3. We have a rook check on f2 and e1. We can eliminate a bunch of these, like rook f2, that hangs a rook. Queen h2 is a fun way to hang a rook. And we can hang our queen on h5. So those we can eliminate. Those aren't good moves. This leaves us with the queen check on g2 and f3 and our rook check on e1. So we should be looking at what our best check is. We don't know, so we have to calculate. Maybe queen f3 looks the best to you. It looks pretty strong to me. Let's play it. Again, we wouldn't play it. We would actually go through this in our head, but we're going to play it on the board so we can go through it visually and see everything. Our opponent has 1 move in this position. They have to go to d2. And after they go to d2, we can look at any of these checks, and all these checks do is allow the king to escape to the c3 square. This looks terrible for us. If the king gets to the c3 square, now any check we give doesn't do anything. The king is completely safe around his army of pawns and his own pieces. So this isn't going to work out for us. That also eliminates now rook to d1 for the same, well, sorry, rook to e1 in this position is now eliminated because the king again escapes to this d2 square and then is escaping to c3 guarded by his own pieces. Okay, let's see now if our last check works or if we're screwed. If we play queen to g2, well, this is good. This is a good sign. The king is not getting to this d2 square, escaping to c3. He's forced instead to e3. If the king's on e3, now we have to calculate from here. Well, we have checks that can hang pieces again. I'm not going to go through those. So let's go through the ones that look a little bit better. We have this queen to f3 check we can look at. If we play queen to f3, the king can run to this d2 square again, escaping. So that's no good. If we play rook to e1, for example, oh, the king can't escape to this d2 square. But he can escape to this d4 square, and now has escaped again because no matter what check we give now, the king is now guarded by his own pawns again. So recall a second ago when I gave this check here, I didn't calculate king to d4 because I had already calculated king to d2 in a very similar position. And in that similar position, it was really bad for me, so it didn't work. So I already knew this didn't work for me. But in this position, this king to d2 move doesn't work, so we have to calculate the other moves, and we learned that this also doesn't work. So now we can look at our last checks, in this position. So we have a remaining of queen to f2 and queen to g1. Well, we know queen to g1 doesn't work because the king again escapes to this d2 squared. This doesn't work. So that actually makes it very obvious that queen to f2 is kind of our only hope. And does queen f2 work? Yes, it does. It's checkmate because now we stop the escape to this d4 square, and we also stop to the escape to the d2 square. And any other escape is also cut off. The queen is also protected. So we've done it. We've delivered checkmate, and we've won the game from the jaws of defeat. Just to go back in time, excuse me, we played this check. It was losing because the king could escape to d2 and get away, but our opponent blundered and went to e2. We then went through our calculations. We calculated a bunch of checks, finding that the only check that gave us any hope was queen to g2. We still don't play queen to g2 yet. We calculate queen to g2, king e3, and then we calculated a bunch of checks from there and found that after that we would play queen to f2, delivering checkmate. And now this is when you go and you play it in your game and you win. So you can start getting familiar with this position while we talk about brilliant moves. So, to get a brilliant move, basically what you have to do is play a move that gives you a winning advantage and a move that's really hard to spot, something that's hard to see. So the most common way to do this is with a sacrifice of material. When you sacrifice material and it's winning, this will be your most surefire way of getting a brilliant move. But how should you go about getting them in your games? My advice is to not hunt for them. When you hunt for them, the problem is you're looking for tactics. And when you're looking for something, you're going to find it. You're going to find a lot of tactics, but they're not going to be correct. Or you're going to neglect certain things about your position. You're going to forget to bring your minor pieces out, to get your pieces on good squares. And that's going to leave you with a bad position. And when you have a bad position, you're not going to have as many tactics available to you. You need your pieces to be coordinated and working together in order for tactics to work. So, in order to do that, my advice is to simply play good moves and try to just play your best. And then on top of that, be on the lookout. Always be looking at your forcing moves, because your forcing moves are where the tactics are. And then practice your puzzles. If you practice a lot of puzzles, you're going to get a lot of repetition of certain tactics, and it's going to become quicker for you to find them. And yeah, so that's my little rant. That's my advice on finding a brilliant move. Now we can actually practice getting a brilliant move in this position. After our opponent moves their rook to d8, that's a mistake. So hopefully you feel a little bit more familiar with this position. We're down 3 pawns, but we're up a knight, so material is even. Okay, if you want to pause the video, try to find the brilliant move on your own, please do so. Otherwise, we'll get into it. In order to find a brilliant move in this position, we need to take advantage of our forcing moves and our knowledge of this position. So, one thing I've talked about in my first video is the concept of just noticing certain qualities about your position and holding on to those ideas. So, what I mean by this is, for example, we can notice that our knight kind of sucks. Our knight is not worth 3 points right now. It's in the corner of the board and it's completely dominated. No matter where our knight could jump to, it's being taken by our opponent's pawn, so that's no good. Another thing we can notice is how we would love our queen and rook to team up on this file, but this pesky pawn is in our way. If we could throw this pawn away, we could go on this really winning attack. We don't need to calculate every move in this position if this pawn wasn't there, but we can know that this would be really strong, knowing that we have 14 points of material attacking the king if we could get rid of this pawn. And actually, right here, using these two ideas, we can find a brilliant move. So, using the idea that this pawn is annoying, we would love to get rid of it, and the knowledge that our knight would love to jump into the game, how could you combine these ideas? So take a second and try to find the brilliant move. So once you've done that, I hope you might have been looking at something like g4, playing the pawn forward, trying to bait your opponent into taking and opening up this file. This is a good idea, but the reason it doesn't work is our opponent doesn't have to take our pawn. Hopefully, then you can keep going with that idea and find the brilliant knight to g4. This is brilliant because if our opponent refuses to take the knight, our queen is likely getting in. And if our queen gets in, this is going to be very powerful because the queen and the knight are teaming up and they're going to jump in and cause chaos and hunt this enemy king. And if our opponent does take, we already talked about this. This would be amazing for us. The file would be open and we would go on this giant attack. The last resource our opponent has is bringing their knight, trying to cover everything. They don't accept the sacrifice opening up this file, and they don't allow our queen to jump in. So now again, can we find our way forward? We have 3 pieces. This one is almost attacking. It's now pinning this pawn because now the rook would hang. So we have 3 pieces attacking the king, the enemy king. This rook on c1 isn't doing anything yet. Can we activate it? Can we get it to a better square? Can we create threats and use our concept of forcing moves? And the answer is yes. Jumping this knight to c7 is given a brilliant move by chess.com. I'm not exactly sure why, but it is the only good move in this position, so maybe that's why. We need to find this move as well, because now all our pieces are hunting the enemy king, and we're going on a winning attack, and there's nothing our opponent can do about this. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into how you can find brilliant moves on your own. Thanks for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, I really, really appreciate it. Like, this is a really long video, so I'd be kind of surprised. I'll leave you with the position we had at the start. So if you have your answer now, or if you want to look at it again, and you come up with an answer, leave it in the comments. Also, this is a very, this is my third video. I don't expect a lot of people to see this. If you want a specific chess topic covered, I would be really happy to do that. Like, so leave a comment too if you want me to make a video about a specific topic, and I'll try to do that for you. So anyway, thank you so much. Have a good one.